Hi everyone, and thank you again for watching Gaffer and Gear. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the Dop Choice Airglow system. So they come in 3 sizes. This is their 2x1. So these things are an inflatable booklight that sits on top of your existing panels. Now this thing is not 2x1 in size. The reason it's called a 2x1 is this mounts to your existing 2x1 LED lights. Now these Airglows come in 3 sizes. The small size is for a 1x1 panel, the medium size, which I'm reviewing today, is for a 2x1 panel, and the large size is for a 2x2 panel. Now the 1x2 kit we're reviewing today sells for about $1,350 US, and that's about 2,200 Australian dollars. Now for that price you get the Airglow, of course. You get a large bag which has this fold out work area on the side, and this bag can fit everything including the air pump and the optional extras. You get the air pump, you get a silver reflector which can attach to the inside of the Airglow, you get 3 diffusions, a quarter, a half and a Snapcloth, and as optional extras not included in the kit, you can buy a snap grid, a bleached muslin reflector or diffuser, and an unbleached muslin reflector and diffuser. Alright, so before we get into the review, let's start off with the regular disclaimers. Dop Choice are not paying me any money for this review, and they have no say in the edit, but they did send me this product for free and all of the accessories, and I do get to keep it at the end of the episode or sell it. So technically that is a payment, which makes this a paid endorsement, and that is something you should be aware of as a viewer, in my opinion. All right, let's go on the inside of this and work our way out and explain what it is. All right, so it's an inflatable booklight. So the sections that inflate are this clear bed down here, and you've got what I'm going to call the ribs. Okay, you've got this section here that inflates and these tubes in here that inflate. So it doesn't actually take all that long to inflate. You don't have to inflate the whole volume of this thing. It's just the ribs and the bed. All right, so the bed is made of a clear plastic so the light underneath can shine through, and there's a cutout in there for your 2x1 lights. Now, if you're using a floodlight like I've got here, which is the Nova, which has a wide spread, you're going to have light hitting the diffuser directly. You're going to have light bouncing off the back and bouncing off the side walls, which is why the side walls and all of the tubing are white. Now, in terms of soft light options, on the back here, we currently have a silver that's in place, but you can also have the choice of a bleached muslin or an unbleached muslin, or you can simply remove the silver and just use it as a white bounce. Now moving to the outside of the unit, you can attach Velcro diffusion to the front. You've got the option of no diffusion, quarter diffusion, half diffusion, this very full milky diffusion, which they call a Snapcloth, and you've also got the optional extras of bleached and unbleached muslin. So in combination with the diffusers on the front, no diffusion on the front, and the options you can have on the inside for the bounce, you've got a total of 24 variations of soft light. You can also put a snap grid on the front. All right, let's have a look at all of the combinations in play. The light is positioned on the left side, just above my eye line, on about a 45-degree angle. When I look to the left, I'm looking directly into the light to give you an idea of where it is. On the right side, just out of frame, is a 4x4 floppy to get rid of any bounce. Now with the text on screen, bounce refers to the option that we have inside the light. And front refers to the diffusion option that I have velcroed to the outside. Now the camera is set to 5600 Kelvin, and the only thing I'm adjusting is the exposure. Now we're up to the combinations using the silver bounce, and this is what I find to be the most interesting of all the combinations. Now just a reminder that all my episodes are indexed and chaptered, so if this section is getting your heart rate too high, you can just skip to the next section. Now we're into the combinations using the bleached muslin as the bounce. And finally, we're into the unbleached muslin combinations. I've done a compilation of the white bounce, the silver bounced, and the bleached muslin with all of the outside diffusion options. Rather than panning this around my workshop, I decided to show what it could do in a small room. And I'm starting off with no diffusion and no bounce option. And as you can see, it gives a very wide, even distribution of soft light. But you do need to be careful with your operating angles. Otherwise you can get light directly off your LED panel. Next, I tried it with the 40-degree grid in the same configuration, and it does offer some very good control. But just note, towards the edge of your beam, you do get some breakup and not a clean drop-off. This is because you've got direct light coming through the grid as well as the soft light bounced off the back, depending on the light that you're using. Next, I tried the half grid in combination with the silver, because I figure for me this is a good trade-off between maximum brightness and softness. Again, it's a very large even distribution of soft light. The 40-degree grid works fantastic in this combination, and there are no issues with drop-off towards the edge of the beam, like we had previously. And finally, I tried the dense white diffusion with the white bounce. And with the grid, we get some good control over the light source. Okay, so let's talk about assembling this now. So if you've gone to their website or to their YouTube channel, you've probably seen a video on assembling it, and it looks quite daunting because that video is explaining how to assemble it for the very first time. So when you assemble it for the first time, you've got to inflate all of the individual components and then build the softbox. But the second time you use it, you don't have to build the softbox, you just have to re-inflate it. So let's just cover that because that's a more typical scenario. All right, so let's do a worst case scenario. We're on the ground here, we don't have a table. Now on the bag, on the outside of the bag, you've got a work area that rolls out. So that gives you a nice clean surface to put the softbox on. So that's pretty clever. I like the fact that it's on the outside of the bag. I don't have to open the bag, take stuff out to find this. It's automatically in place for me. That's brilliant. Now I've got it unfolded and the correct way up on the setup mat, and I'm just ready to inflate it. Now, here's a little tip I've got for you to help speed up the process. After you've deflated it from the last time you use it, go to the effort of putting the one-way valves back on and opening up the top so that it's ready to receive the pump. That'll save you a couple of minutes of fiddling around. All right, let's see how quickly this thing inflates. Now, this pump could be a little bit of a pain if you're tall. Now, it says 5 psi. I've got no idea how much that is, so I'm just going to make sure that it's firm. Okay, now all I've got to do is inflate the bottom mat, but before I do that, I'll close off my valves. So in that process there, I've inflated the walls. So that was just these two valves. Now I've got to inflate the mat. I've decided to turn it around so you can see what I'm doing. Now the mat takes the longest to inflate. Maybe a bit more. Okay. So no trick editing was done there. I didn't speed up the footage or anything like that. That's how long it's going to take you to inflate it. Now, all you've got to do now is put the softbox onto the light and feed the light through the hole. Now in this case, I'm using a Nova P600C. And then the last step is to feed the straps through, which are Velcro. Maybe I'll do this one up a bit tighter. And job done. Now, one argument that's been constantly thrown around as a potential pro for this is how small a footprint it has on a small location. So that got me thinking. I mean, I just assumed when I heard that initial argument that they were talking about this in regards to building a regular book light. Now, for me, that argument doesn't make sense. I mean, this clearly takes up less space than a regular book light, but in my 25-year career as a gaffer, nobody has ever asked me to make a book light that is this small. Every book light I've ever made has been a 6x6 front minimum, usually a 12x12 or an 8x8. So as an argument, that doesn't really make sense for me. But when I got this into the workshop here, it did get me thinking, you know, in comparison to other soft lights that have a very similar sized aperture, does this thing have a smaller footprint? And here's the logic that I was going with. With this, the light is underneath, and of course the stand is underneath that. Maybe that does give you a smaller footprint than having a light stand with the light on top and the softbox modifier in front. Like for example, if we're up against a wall, would this stay out of the edge of shot more than having a stand with a similar size modifier on the front of that? Now, the other thing that also got me curious is I noticed that this thing is a triangle shape. And if I want the soft light up high pointing down, we've now got a flat top. So you could potentially have this right up high against a ceiling in a small house and have it pointing down. Now, does that take up less footprint? Let's say we've got a wall here. Does that take up more or less footprint than, say, a large sized soft light, panel light that's very thin? But when it's angled down, does it take up more or less footprint? So that's starting to get interesting. And the other thing I was thinking is, because the light is underneath the modifier, but on top of the stand pointing up, can you get this thing up higher, say working in a house, then you could other softbox modifiers that would require a bigger stand, because the stand on this is only down to here, but the top of the modifier is here. So let's put this onto a baby combo, push it up against a wall, and see if we can get it up to the ceiling safely. This is definitely giving us a small footprint on the set. Now let's try the same thing on the same stand with a sky panel with a snap bag. And to try and get it up against the wall a bit more, I've even put the stand on a tilt. Now the interesting thing here, we can't get up to the ceiling, even with the same size light stand. So if my goal was to get that sky panel up to ceiling height with a softbox modifier on the front, then I would need a taller stand with a bigger footprint. So in that circumstance, definitely this has a smaller footprint. Now let's take a look with one of my go-to lights for this scenario, which is the Aladdin 3x3. These are now the oldest lights that I've got in my kit. Now on a similar 45-degree angle facing down, it has pretty much the same footprint. But of course it does have the advantage, it's way easier to set up. Now when you take all of the fronts off one of these, there's not much difference in the aperture size compared to a 2 foot by 4 foot mat. So let's chuck a Spectrum into the mix as well. And of course the Spectrum has the smallest footprint of the lot. Now the next thing I was curious about is a light matte spectrum is only 200 watt, whereas the Airglow here has a 600 watt Nova inside. Does that give us a brightness advantage? So at the same time that I did the previous tests in the bedroom, I also took some light readings as well. I took some readings with the Airglow with nothing attached to the front and just the white back as the bounce. I also took a reading with the half grid plus the silver bounce inside, and I took some readings with the full diffusion and the white bounce. And I compared that to my Aladdin, which has a half grid, and I also compared it to the light matte spectrum using a half grid. Now the Aladdin was brighter than everything else. The spectrum was the least brightest light, which is no surprise. But if you take a look at the f-stop numbers, there's not much difference between the whole lot. So if you're using 600 watts or lower as the light that's inside this, there's not really a brightness advantage. Okay, let's finish off with my closing thoughts. I really do like some of the combinations you can do with this, particularly the silver with no diffusion or the lightweight diffusions. I like the way you've got that soft light, but it's still got some hard light specularity to it. But in terms of a white light or white diffusion options, so not using the silver, not using the unbleached muzz, I've got other lighting options as an established gaffer that can do what this thing can do in pretty close to this form factor, a 2x4, that are way easier to set up than this. So I don't think this would play all that often. But where this thing clearly heroes to me is its big brother. When I saw the 2x2 at Cinegear, I just thought that makes sense. That is a massive softbox that can move around on one stand on wheels. I saw that and thought that makes a lot of sense on a big soundstage. What other soft light options are there out there in that size that can be wheeled around on a single light stand? And that footage comes compliments of Luke Seerveld over at Meet the Gaffer. I'm Andrew Locke, thank you for watching Gaffer and Gear. See you on the next episode, and remember, take care of each other on set.